History-Informed Reform, Restoring the Founding Vision of the PDGA by Matthew Rothstein. The Founding Father. Few names carry as much weight in the world of disc golf as Steady Ed Headrick. Often referred to as the sport's founding father, Headrick was the inventor of the modern disc golf basket and the driving force behind the creation of its Players Association, the PDGA, in 1976. During its early years, he ran the PDGA mainly as a promotional arm of his disc golf manufacturing business, the DGA, setting the rules, promoting the game, and shaping its competitive landscape from the top down. But by the early 1980s, as players began taking on more of an organizational role, they also began demanding a greater say in how the sport was run. The Players Revolt. A critical confrontation between Headrick and the players took place in 1982, when Ed insisted that only discs from his own company could be used in the inaugural PDGA World Championships, despite the growing popularity of newer, heavier discs like Jan Sobel's Super Puppy. In excluding his competitors, Headrick was characteristically defiant. "If you don't like the sponsor, don't participate," he wrote. "Perhaps some of the disc manufacturers on your list would like to sponsor a PDGA tournament." But by 1983, that argument was wearing thin. The host team for the '83 Huntsville Worlds, Tom Monroe and Lavone Wolf, went over Headrick's head and declared that any disc that met PDGA specifications would be allowed. With the arrival of beveled-edge discs like Innova's Aero and the new premium plastics being developed by Discraft, it was becoming clear that the sport, as well as its Players Association, was outgrowing its founder. Then, in the fall of 1983, tour director Ted Smethers wrote a letter to Headrick, outlining a new plan for PDGA governance. Headrick, to his credit, recognized the strength of Smethers' vision and shared the letter with the membership, praising it as a document that summarizes our past and present so clearly that it needs to be repeated before considering our plans for the future. With the advent of organized tournament play has come the need for more of a group effort, Smethers wrote. The sport has evolved from a hodgepodge of tournaments scattered about the country to a pre-scheduled tour, resulting in an overall championship tournament. We have all played a big part in this development. Now the time has come for even better things. He proposed the drafting of a formal guiding document to reflect the shared priorities of players and organizers alike. This document, when finished, will be to the PDGA what the Constitution is to the United States. Meanwhile, Headrick was faced with mounting financial pressures. WAMO, which had long supported the DGA and by extension the PDGA, had recently been sold and disbanded its International Frisbee Association along with much of its investment in competitive disc sports. Without WAMO's support, Headrick and the DGA could no longer afford to subsidize the PDGA. Ed announced that he would remain on to lead the association for one more year, at which point he would turn over control to the players. In the meantime, he would help transition the PDGA to its own independent financial footing. A year later, at the 1984 Worlds in Rochester, Ed made good on his promise. At the players' meeting, Ted Smethers was chosen to succeed Headrick as PDGA director by general acclamation, and Ed symbolically handed over the reins, along with a bottle of Genesee cream ale. But while that moment is often remembered as a clean break, the transition was far more complicated. The next year, with Smethers at the helm, the PDGA found itself facing an international challenge to its global authority. The WFDF Controversy, How Many Worlds Can One Planet Hold? The World Flying Disc Federation, WFDF, which had been constituted in 1984 to serve as the umbrella organization for all flying disc sports, precipitated something of a diplomatic crisis when it announced that it would host a 1985 World Disc Golf Championship in Helsingborg, Sweden, even though the PDGA was already planning its own World Championship that year in Tulsa. Ted Smethers, now the PDGA director, surprised and confused many members by announcing a compromise. The PDGA would recognize both World Championships in 1985, its own in Tulsa and WFDF's event in Sweden. Moreover, Smethers laid out a plan to scale back the PDGA's scope and mission, limiting its focus to North America. I would like to be able to represent all disc golf players everywhere in the universe, he wrote. But the reality of the situation is that we just cannot handle it. Hell, we can barely get the news out over here. Smethers acknowledged that Sweden's substantial government support for disc sports, including $25,000 in guaranteed prize money and official national recognition, gave them both the means and the momentum to take the lead in organizing a global federation. I have been informed that the Europeans have about as many disc golf courses as there are here in North America, he wrote. They are in many ways much more organized than we are. While we were off deciding who would host the next WDGC, they were meeting to decide that it was high time they hosted their own WDGC. And to hell with us. Since we did not ask them, they did not feel the need to ask us. Some praised Smethers' diplomacy, while others expressed concerns that he had made such a significant decision unilaterally. The issue will certainly come up that I have no authority to make these kinds of decisions, Smethers admitted, anticipating his critics. I have considered the consequences of my actions and believe that I have acted in the best interest of disc golf. When the communication tools are in place and working well, and a formal organization is formed with a constitution and elected representatives, decisions can be handled differently. Many top U.S. players and organizers agreed with Smethers. Lavone Wolf criticized the PDGA's Tulsa Worlds as being disorganized. From a competitor's viewpoint, the worst tournament he had ever attended, and argued that it was disingenuous to keep calling a U.S.-only event a world championship. When my friends and family ask how many countries participated and I answer one or two, I can always sense their skepticism, he wrote. Texas promoter John Houck noted that the World Flying Disc Federation's golf tournament in Sweden offered more money, better organization, global participation, and television coverage that was far superior. Russell Schwartz, TD for the upcoming 1986 PDGA World Championships in Charlotte, even threatened to resign unless the name of the tournament was changed, arguing that it was impossible to secure sponsorships knowing that the name of the tournament was misleading. Houck, in particular, was adamant about what the PDGA should do. Let's end the confusion. Let's recognize the authority of the WFDF to make these decisions for us. Disc golf declares its independence. But Steady Ed wasn't ready to let the PDGA cede its authority to WFDF so quickly. In a series of letters, he forcefully pushed back, arguing that the World Championship was a valuable asset that belonged to the PDGA and that a decision of this magnitude should not be made by the director alone. I fully appreciate the efforts in Europe by the various disc organizations and am extremely pleased that Sweden has seen fit to welcome and support disc sports with money. However, I must still maintain that a matter of this magnitude must be put to the membership or their elected representatives, he wrote. I have personally spent 10 years and a substantial amount of cash building toward the title, and I resent it being treated as something of so little value that it can be turned over to a group who have of yet no officers and no authority. The World Disc Golf Championship belongs to the PDGA and cannot be given away without the approval of the membership. Headrick also began making the argument that disc golf could, and probably should, stand on its own. It need not be tied to other disc sports like ultimate freestyle or guts. And because of its unique economic circumstances with specialized discs and equipment, it was well positioned to thrive as an independent sport. He noted disc golf players were among the biggest consumers of flying discs, second only to toy buyers. I really don't think that what the WFDF has to say is relevant, Headrick argued. PDGA members are not as interested in the other disc sports as they used to be. Times are changing. The golf discs of today are as far away from an ultimate disc and a freestyle disc as a baseball is from a basketball. I'm not so sure that a federation has any value to offer a disc golfer, any more than you would expect the NBA to represent baseball players. There are a lot of people in our sport who never heard of ultimate or freestyle. Why should they be burdened with basketball players' problems? I suggest we stay with our new organization and straighten out our own problems before we leap into the problems of the world, he concluded. Let's elect our officers as we agreed to at last year's WDGC and adopt a constitution of our own, not someone else's. Other influential leaders, such as Columbia Disc Golf News publisher Rick Rothstein, backed Headrick's push for independence. Rothstein pointed out that even though WFDF had said it would respect each sport's independent player association, their promotion of a disc golf world championship without PDGA involvement told a different story. "I am less than impressed with WFDF's initial efforts," he wrote, "and I invite disc golfers in the PDGA to join in the ongoing and already successful effort to make the PDGA an international organization." Unlike many others, Ed had no hesitation about projecting a global image, even if at the time the PDGA was still almost entirely North American. "Every stick and ball player in the world knows the World Series is the top of the world of baseball," Ed argued. "I don't believe the title is dishonest, even though in this case, there are no teams from Sweden. We want players from all over the world, and to have PDGA members from all over the world." Ultimately, it was Ed's vision of a worldwide organization, independent of the other disc sports, that won the day. The PDGA reversed course, reclaiming authority over the World Championship title and recommitting to building a global infrastructure for disc golf. July 1986, the Players' Constitution. The WFDF episode proved to be a turning point. It underscored the need for clearer lines of authority, formal rules, and member input in major strategic decisions. In its aftermath, a coalition of PDGA leaders and players rallied to finalize and ratify a formal constitution. The final version, co-drafted by Ed himself, was overwhelmingly approved in July 1986 by a vote of 142 to 2. Among the Constitution's expressly stated purposes was to maintain an organized framework for representative government by the members of the association. It included specific procedural rights for the members, such as the right to attend board and committee meetings, the right to see documents, and the right for every side of an issue to be fully heard before a decision was made. In short, the Constitution stated that the PDGA shall conduct all of its affairs in the open. Headrick, who had once run the PDGA as its sole decision-maker, had now become one of its fiercest advocates for open, member-driven governance. For 2 decades, despite its flaws, the open governance model established by the 1986 Constitution remained in place. The document was ambitious and idealistic, demanding levels of transparency, participation, and volunteer effort that were difficult to sustain. During the 1990s, those ideals sometimes led to complications, from minor bureaucratic frustrations to major governing crises. But even with its shortcomings, the Constitution endured as a respected framework, regularly cited by members who valued the rights and principles it guaranteed. And the organization didn't just survive those years, it grew. The 2006 Rewrite, A Quiet Revolution. By the early 2000s, the PDGA had grown to the point where many leaders felt that a more streamlined, professionalized model was necessary. There was a clear need to reduce administrative burdens, clarify board authority, and bring the PDGA's governing documents in line with modern nonprofit practices. In 2003, shortly after Headrick's death, the PDGA board began discussing constitutional updates. By 2006, what began as a modest revision had become a wholesale rewrite. Headrick's member-first constitution was replaced with a leaner, corporate-style set of bylaws. The new bylaws didn't just streamline operations. They stripped away core protections that had anchored member-driven governance. Gone were the guarantees of transparency, open meetings, and member input on major decisions. The board was now free to operate largely behind closed doors. Behind the scenes, the process raised concerns. The PDGA went through 3 attorneys during the rewrite, and at least one resigned after realizing he was being asked to dismantle rights the members had held for decades. When concerned members requested to see the proposed changes ahead of the vote, they were told that the documents would not be ready in time. One board member even stated bluntly, "We are not looking for discussion." The board moved forward, confident that the membership would approve the rewrite. PDGA members had historically voted in good faith to ratify changes placed before them, especially on technical governance matters. Some board members even spoke of when the new bylaws would pass, not if. Their confidence proved well placed. The result was a quiet but consequential shift in the organization's governing philosophy. The slow drift. In the 2 decades since the Constitution was replaced, the PDGA board has drifted toward a closed-door culture. Big decisions, event contracts, media rights, and other strategic partnerships are handled through processes that are increasingly hard to follow. Contracts that used to be openly debated by committees are now awarded through private conversations between a small group of PDGA staff and key members of the board. Information is siloed, and other staff and even other board members are often kept in the dark until a proposal is finalized. PDGA staff and board members are now required to sign broad non-disclosure agreements, agreements that go well beyond protecting trade secrets or legally sensitive information. In practice, they prevent elected representatives and key personnel from speaking openly about how the PDGA conducts its business, even to the members they serve. The PDGA's conflict of interest policy, meanwhile, is both self-policed and confusing. It requires a majority of fellow board members to enforce, something that almost never happens, and the policy makes a curious exception. Board members are barred from benefiting financially from PDGA decisions, except when it comes to events. That carve-out allows board members with ties to major events or professional tours to influence decisions from which they or their business partners may benefit, leading to the perception of self-dealing. There are some democratic elements still in place. Board minutes are posted, but they're often delayed weeks or even months, and are light on detail. Elections happen, but with little information to distinguish candidates or help voters make meaningful choices. Members are surveyed for their opinion on rules changes, but major decisions like the bylaws rewrite happen without their input, much less their consent. At the end of the day, the board is left to set its own rules and to call its own balls and strikes. Some have argued that the PDGA has outgrown transparency and open governance, but that claim doesn't hold up. The PDGA now lags behind other major sports governing bodies in transparency and oversight. The International Olympic Committee, FIFA, and World Athletics have all implemented robust, open governance reforms in the wake of scandals that threatened their legitimacy. And unlike the modern PDGA, most major sports governing bodies now include independent ethics commissions or oversight structures to ensure accountability and guard against conflicts of interest. We can learn from their example, as well as from the lessons of our own history. The 1986 PDGA Constitution arose from the lived experience of PDGA members who knew firsthand the dangers of concentrated authority. Today, the warning signs of disengagement are clear. Membership, which once grew steadily year after year, has now declined 2 years in a row, even as the sport itself continues to grow. Voter turnout in board elections has dropped to record lows. Cynicism about PDGA leadership dominates the conversation. Members are tuning out because they no longer believe their voices matter. A defining choice. In the end, we are faced with the same question this organization has wrestled with from the beginning. Are we, first and foremost, a business focused on selling products to customers? Or are we the governing body of disc golf, the only organization capable of representing the interests of the entire sport? Ed Headrick initially built the PDGA as part of his business, but even he came to see that it could only survive as something more. He worked with the players to transform it into a true players association, accountable to its members, grounded in democratic principles, and driven by the belief that players are not customers but citizens of the sport. And now we face that same choice again. The PDGA Members' Bill of Rights was written to restore the core values of member-driven governance and to adapt them to the needs of a modern, global organization. It reflects the same truth that Headrick, Smethers, and the other early leaders came to realize, that if the PDGA is truly to be the governing body of the sport, then players must be able to see how it works and have a say in shaping it. Matthew Rothstein is the author of the forthcoming book Steady, The Untold History of Disc Golf, to be released in 2026 for the 50th anniversary of the founding of the PDGA. He is also the author of the PDGA Members' Bill of Rights, a 10-point reform proposal to restore transparency, accountability, and member-driven governance.